Good evening. I'm Kate O'Neill, Director of UNM-Taos, and I want to welcome you on behalf of my colleagues at SMU and all of us at UNM-Taos to this evening speaker series with Robert Mirabal. We're very excited to have you joining us. Yes, absolutely. We're very excited to have you joining us, and I want to make a couple of quick announcements. There's a table outside with some information about the GEO bond has started, and please take a moment to educate yourself about those bond issues. They're really important to us here in Taos as well as statewide. So thank you for taking the time to learn about those. They're actually on the back of your ballot, and they're really important for education in libraries and things that are near and dear to our hearts. So take a moment to do that. I also want to let you know that next week's speaker is Dr. Mike Adler, himself the director of SMU-in-Taos, and he'll be talking about the history of a Pueblo village. So same time next Wednesday, 7 o'clock. With that, I'd like to introduce someone who actually does not need much of an introduction, Taos Pueblo's own Robert Mirabal. He performs worldwide, sharing flute songs, tribal rock dance, and storytelling. He is a famous instrument maker from Taos Pueblo, and his flutes are world-renowned and have been displayed at the Smithsonian Institution's Museum of the American Indian. Robert Mirabal was twice named the American Music Awards Artist of the Year, and he received the Songwriter of the Year award 3 times. Mr. Mirabal was featured in the Grammy Award-winning album Sacred Ground, a tribute to Mother Earth in 2006, for the Best Native American Music Album. Robert Mirabal has written 2 books, one about storytelling, poetry, and prose, entitled Skeletons of a Bridge, and another, Running Alone in Photographs. Aside from his artistic endeavors, Robert Mirabal is a father and a farmer, living in Taos Pueblo and participating in the traditional ways and rituals of his people. Please join me in offering a great big hand for Robert Mirabal.
Messed up my mic. Well, thank you for coming out tonight. I wasn't quite sure what to present, so what I would like to talk about is it was billed as a lecture, so I'm like, okay. I hate lectures. However, I love academia and where it takes us as a people, and where it takes us whether it to be an educational institution or a society of people or a society of men and women, however large they are. So one thing that I wanted to create tonight was based on the flutes, and based on history as well as mythology, the different flute styles, the poetry of song, the rhythm in song, different scales, ancient scales that have inspired me around the world. And I'd like to start out with how I have composed my music, and where this derived from is coming from a language that isn't written. When a language isn't written, you value song, dance, rhythm, and poetry. You value the simplicity and the nuances of an old man limping down the road. And you value when he fell into the river. and he pulled himself out with the willows. So from the old times, there's a place called Hilhipasel, place where the man fell into the river. So you value things within the simplicity, and that creates your poetry. And so that has become one of my largest and most inspired elements of my music. And of course, the elements of creating these one-of-a-kind instruments. This is a piece of work that I painstakingly accomplished through the help of the School of Advanced Research in Santa Fe. I got a fellowship and I didn't know what to do, so I just started writing. And what came out of it was how bored I was with my own life. So I created a character, and it helped me to really understand my accomplishments. And I think at any given time in your life, you will be kind of sick of your name, you'll be sick of yourself, and you're like, damn, what did I do? And then, so in that moment of time, I created a character and put it into my world. And it just so happened that this character was a woman. And it led me to see my life from more of a place of the left brain rather than from an analytical point of view, never being enough. And I grew up in an all-woman family, and so for me to place myself in that particular role gave me the opportunity to honor myself as a man-child, as a grandson of my grandmother. And so that's kind of how this particular stories begin. So the mythology begins. UNM, the song, the music, the melody. How does the song go? Where does the head begin of that song? The music was fearful at one time when he was very young. The music was fearful at one time when he was very young, timid like a little boy. But those days are long departed. Now he has confidence, formed, baya, formed from the carving, clawing his name on the atmosphere, to touch the world in millions of tiny fractions that push away all the knowledge and everything you know. Now he has confidence, formed from the carving, clawing his name on the atmosphere. The music was fearful at one time when he was very young, timid like a little boy, but those days are long departed. Now he has confidence, formed from the carving, clawing his name on the atmosphere, to touch the world in millions of tiny fractions. Millions of tiny fractions that push away all the knowledge and everything you know. Drop in wind-set truth, dusty secrets for you to unravel. Drop in wind-set truth, dusty secrets for you to unravel. UNM, music, UNM, the singer, for you to unravel. He lets you become yourself to bring about laughter in the moisture of life. He lets you become yourself to bring about laughter in the moisture of life. He lets you become yourself to bring about laughter in the moisture of life. I did not choose music. It chose me. Just like love, I did not choose to love, it chose me. No man sat me down. No man sat me down saying this. This is your plan. This is your plan. See, I didn't choose music, it chose me. And just like love, it has destroyed every road I carved out. Every road I've carved out, music has destroyed and music has built. So now I choose to live in this barren world alone. Find me, yes you did. I let you in, yet you sliced me up so beautiful in the dark. See, this is my conversation with music. Sitting on a tour bus wondering, man, what am I doing here? Find me, it still did, yes you did. I let you in, and yet you sliced me up so beautifully in the dark. What a wondrous vampire you became. Naked I stood as you sucked my blood. You stared at me and found the new me. Handed me my ugliness, forged a new me. When I reached for you, all I had left were footprints. I followed them until they faded away. Now I miss you. Now I miss you more than when you were with me. I need you. There is no new drug that can help. We are both living in dangerous times. Who I was yesterday is gone. Now I am giving birth to who I am today. Unfold your musical secrets. Unfold your secrets. Plant a new tree from across the ocean. Scream to me that you are free, that you can fly to me. Fight for me when all is said and done. A new beginning crawls, oozing out of the old. Fight for me when all is said and done. A new beginning crawls, oozing out of the old. You struggle to control the afterbirth of my giants and monsters. You struggle to control the afterbirths of my giants and monsters. This was no longer sacred ground, you said. Stirred up, settles in the debris of my cup. Who sees my scars? Who sees my scars in the darkness? Only your heart. Who hears me underneath waterfalls? Only your heart. Deep inside the dark earth, it is only you. Still healing, still creating vitality. For me, from 1,000 miles away. I did not choose love, just like I didn't choose music. It chose me. So now, I choose to be alone. I choose to be alone. Extremely alone. instruments, I'll give you a little history of them. They came to the Taos Pueblo through trade. And the Taos people, as well as a lot of the different pueblos down the Rio Grande Valley, their buffalo hunting grounds was in southern Colorado, right around Pueblo, Colorado, right around, that was considered Southern Cheyenne country, and it was also considered Kiowa and Comanche country, and it was also Utes, and the Apaches were all over the place in that area. But there's an old trail when you go from the Pueblo. There's an old trail that takes you in to Cuesta, and from Cuesta it takes you up, straight up, and it was called the Kiowa Trail, and the Kiowa Trail brought you directly into Bent's Fort in that area in Pueblo. That area was huge buffalo drop grounds where the Cheyennes, as well as the Pueblo, the Taos men would gather together at this time of the year, after the big feast day. It was hunting days. They call them hunting days, or time to gather wood days, or hunting days. They were all specific. So they would go out and take their best horses out, and they would often take a lot of trade. It was stuff that the women would make here, the pots, as well as some of the different serapes that the Spanish and the Mexicans would make. They would all trade up in that area. This huge trading center, and that's one of the reasons why Bent's Fort was so huge. It's because it was already an ancient gathering place. It was between the east connection to the south and connection to the west. And so by those hunting stories, and is how they got this instrument to trade. So the Taosmen brought this instrument down, and it was always considered a social instrument. Tuputsino is what they called it. Is the blow-in cylinder, a piece of which you blow into. And there was also traditional instruments that were created in the ancient times that you'll find from the tips of Terra del Fuego all the way into Central America, follow up the Camino Real, you'll find a certain instrument. It's an end-blown flute that you can find in Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde, the Grand Gulch, all these different places. And this is more of the traditional ancient instrument. And those instruments were the wind makers. Those instruments are the ancient ones. And some guys now, to this day, are experimenting on how to make them. I don't make those instruments. They're meant for the ancients. But this instrument came in, they say it follows love. And this instrument was considered to be an instrument that would create love. So if a young man was in love with some woman from the south side and he was from the north side, he would go out and he'd play his music in the morning by the river, because that's where she's going to go. Everybody goes to the river. And she would gather her water in the morning, or she would go down in the evening. And so she would hear this melody, and they said that the Cheyennes told the Pueblo guy, yeah, just play for her, she'll come to you. So he's like, yeah, I started playing out. No sign. And so he's like, nah, this thing don't work. Somebody else picked it up. And the girl married somebody else. But somebody else picked it up out of the dust and said, what's this thing here? So the girl comes out, wait, what's that? So he gets lucky. But it has the quality, even to find that magic. But all music on some level, just as poetry, has a really unusual essence to create magic. And so this instrument was kind of on the underground for many, many years. Nobody was playing it because it wasn't part of the culture. So my grandma would hear stories of young men playing it, but she never really actually heard it. So sometime in the 80s, there was a man by the name of Adam Trujillo. He was well known as a dancer. He traveled all over the world. He was at the World's Fair in the 1930s in Chicago and all that different places. And somewhere he learned how to make this instrument out of cedar. And by the time I was about 18 years old, this man was making only his last flutes. And I got one of his flutes at a powwow. And he was my grandpa's, like, not blood brother, but he was one of his brothers from the societies. And I acquired my first flute from that man, but he never showed me how to make these instruments. He died shortly, a few months after that. And so I just started learning how to play this instrument. But the first instrument that I actually played was when I was about 13 years old, and it was a clay instrument. And it was an instrument that came from Peru. And it looked like a little carrot. And I was 13 years old, actually right here on this stage, but I played with this group called Ayocon. And it was the first time I had heard music of the Andes, with the pan flutes, the zampaños and the chorongos, the little mandolin made of armadillos. And it was one of the last shows that we did, and he was pretty buzzed, and he goes, "You, vato, amigo, mi brother, mi hermano," and he says, he's giving you this. And I'm like, wow, okay. So that was the first instrument that I really actually started to mess around with. And then this instrument came. And when I started playing this instrument, there was only 6 people in America playing this instrument. Literally, there was nobody. I mean, there was LPs. There was like 78 recordings, the 78 albums, the vinyl records. There was a young guy from South Dakota that learned some of the flute melodies. His name was can't remember. Jeez. I'll remember this. There was that guy, and then there was another album that was by a Kiowa man by the name of Doc Tate Navaquola. He had one album out, and then there was another guy named Tommy Ware that had these LPs out. And these 3 were the only albums that were actually out that had like 30 minutes of just flute music. There was stuff that came out in Folkways record that had like the Apache fire dance mixed in with the Taos Pueblo Moonlight songs recorded at the Gallup National Fair in 1930s or something. And there was a flute melody in there, very poorly recorded. And so from that time on, when I started playing, there was a huge, there was it was an obscure instrument. I mean, that was the first time my grandma actually heard it, when I sat down in the bed in that powwow, after the powwow, and started playing it. So it created magic, and it created more stories of what the things that she remembered. And so we'll go into a little bit of history. At that time that I started playing, there was a huge amount of world music sounds. I think people like Peter Gabriel were doing some amazing collaborations with people all over the world. He was fusing music from South Africa with music from Jamaica. And that was a time when a lot of the New Agers started wearing crystals. Ooh, a wrap of crystal, that's what it means. And that's when a lot of people started picking sage, and the word smudging came from. Smudge, everybody knows what that means now. Well, we're gonna smudge the house. And nobody was doing that, man. Nobody, man. They were like, smudge. We're gonna smudge some mud under there. What are you gonna do? Nobody was claiming to be Indian. Even if you were Cherokee, you were like, nah. Nobody. And all of a sudden, cowboys started wearing leathers. Turquoise became the big thing. And here's this 19-year-old, 20-year-old punk kid at the Pueblo that started getting invited to, like Robert Redford's barbecue up in El Dorado, Started getting calls from, we got this video that we want you to do your thingy, that pipe you played. Everybody called it a pipe. I don't play a pipe, I smoke a pipe, but I don't play a pipe. So there was a huge, amazing little thing that was happening at that time. And I played more weddings than a bar mitzvah band in the Lower East Side, let me tell you. It was intense, because here's this 20-year-old kid, doesn't have an idea, had a clue. I applied to one university, and that was at the World College at Montezuma in Las Vegas. Not that Las Vegas, but the one over the mountain. The one that has where you put the people that are kind of not all there. And I didn't get accepted. I barely graduated, and I was like, what am I gonna do? And this instrument really forged a whole nother direction for me. And my grandma gave me some money, and I rented a little studio. Now Walmart wasn't there yet. It was still just a big old sage field. They kind of didn't know what to do with that place. And there was a place there, and I rented some time. There and just played music. Made a little cassette. Made a small little cassette and it was called Systole. And people thought that it was a native word, and I drew this hand with all this abstract Mondrian type of style of thing, with a hand on it. It had a tree here and something. And, whoa, it's a native word, right? For a heartbeat, right? Well, it was the last word on an S, on the dictionary. Oh wow, check that out. Systolic. Oh, systole. Oh wow. Oh, music from the heartbeat. Yeah. I was making it up, man. I was like, yeah, man, it's heartbeat music, man. It's music from the corazón, man. So he's like, yeah, that's an Indian word for heartbeat, yeah. And so I started playing along with it, started, hanging out at the hot springs, playing my flute, and say, hey, you want to see my horses? It's a rock star thing, man. It's a piece of wood with holes in it, But the more and more, there was more and more influences. I remember, like my sister and I, we'd say, well, Denise, we need some, money for Christmas. And I'd give her a box of cassettes, rainbow cassettes. We'd give me a box of them, okay? She'd go out and she'd bust out, man. Well, here's the checks. It's like, wow. It's like, wow. It's like a drug dealer, Got money going, man. I remember, there was, put a phone in at my grandma's house. The phone would ring and my grandma would, she'd look at it and she'd look at us like, answer it, Grandma, answer it. No, I don't want to touch that thing. So it was like everything was changing for my family, as well as for the people at the Pueblo, as well as for music around the world. And slowly it came about, we call it, the Dances with Wolves era. Man, that knocked us way back, man. We were like going forward, and all of a sudden we're like, how come you're not wearing the skins or the loincloth? And okay, I'll wear the loincloth and pull the part. It was crazy, because when that came out, it became so huge. I remember we were negotiating, there's a little flute melody in that, and we were negotiating who was going to play that melody. And somebody from, Joblo, Montana just said, oh, I can play a flute, and just played a melody, and just like, boom, and then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, you're in demand, you're this, you're that. And then there came a time when there was, when this instrument, like I couldn't hold on to them. I mean, I was like making them, and there was people in line, okay, here's this, here's that. I had no idea what was happening. I didn't understand scales. I didn't understand, I understood how to read some music rhythmically, because I used to play drums, but I didn't understand what this was all about. All I understood was that this music was changing people's lives. And so I started to do more and more research about it. And one of the things that I found out that was pretty interesting was the fact that this instrument in old times was made by the length of your arm, your fingers. These were your measurements. And from the tip of your elbow to your middle finger, that was the length of your flute to where the first hole would be. The size of your palm would be where this would be these two chambers in here. That will be the size from your mouthpiece to the end of the first chamber. From the mouthpiece, from the entry of the second chamber, would have been where your first note goes. And it will be index finger, your thumb, and that's how the measurements were. And the circumference of the flute would be the size of your thumb. And so that created a scale within your own body. It was an actual body scale that came out. The scale was yours. However, what began to happen was we got a huge amount of scholars that were just so anal about the chromatic scale that they were trying to pitch them into an A440. But as you guys know, an A440 is such a minuscule part of what is the frequency of life in the world, and trees and everything. And so I started creating scales that were kind of different, and that set me off into Japan. And I studied music and culture there when I was just 23 years old. And some of the stuff that I learned out there was very different and unusual. And so I started applying that into these instruments. Is one of the first instruments that I made to try to copy a Japanese shakuhachi. Had no idea that these are the end-blown flutes. And then I started researching that there was 3 different unique scales that a full-grown man would create with the hands, his arms, and that movement. That whole theory of your own body scale. And these were considered the ancient, lack of a better term, they were considered holy scales. Holy meaning H-O-L-Y. But the first one that I studied was what was considered the water scale. And the water scale was this one. They compose a lot of music based on a 4/4 rhythm, a shuffle beat. So this would be considered like a round dance beat. The embellishments were what I started to hear in a lot of different players. And so it's a note embellishment, it's a dot with a flash up on it. And there's that tremolo. So in notation form, you would have the note, squiggly sign, dot, up. So I started creating my own notational form because I wanted to remember melodies. I wanted to create my own melodies and understand what this instrument was doing at certain times. And then there was, so that was coming out of the F sharp, the water scale. And then I started to find out that there was another scale. This scale came more from the south, and this is an A. A lot of the melodies from Central America were composed in a relative A minor, and this scale was interesting. It represents your throat, and this area was where, when you can't say what you feel, you can play it in music. And when I started to create enough instrument where I could actually sell some, I really didn't put them into a certain key, but I began to see different people drawn to this certain tone that had a hard time saying what they feel. It was strange, but I began to see those parallels. Then there was another scale that I really wanted to make. And this one came out with my study of light. The study of colors, and I began to study meridians. That there was a certain color that was representative of the heart. And that one was like a greenish tone of some, like a green, not actual green, it was a certain greenish color. And I started to research on it, that there was a tone that fell into a G minor, what would be considered a G minor. And that was also considered one of the last of the three ancient scales. So whether these ancient people knew what they were reflecting on, they created A to maintain the voice, to say the things that you feel, and if you can't say it, to find a place that you can express yourself with. They found the key to the heart, that all music and all expression should come from the heart. You open up A and G follows. F sharp is based on lift. On the lift, the water scale is based on that element where it will flow. So it was strange, because I found that out in Japan when I was living there. I started to study my own music because I was like, well, what's your music about, is what they started asking me. So that's where I started coming off with these. But there's all kinds of stuff that you can start to research, but I noticed that right off the bat that those certain keys were reflective of an ancient scale. And here's another one that when I started making these instruments. There's several of them up here that you can see, later on, but they have evolved into a whole nother level of artistry. And now I'm collaborating on design with a guy by the name of Brent Haynes, who decides that he wasn't good enough as an engineer, I guess, I don't know. So he says, well, I can make flutes. He was making chairs. You know, those Amish chairs or some kind of chairs. And he said, nah, started making flutes. Became pretty good at it. So I started, he bought a boring machine. Not like boring, but like boring. He could bore wood at the same time as it turned it. What I was doing was splitting them in half and chisel them out with like go down to Randall's and get a chisel and chisel them out and sand and try to put them into. But he had a machine that could bore wood, and so it gave me the opportunity to really study different kinds of notations. And this is another one that I'm up to date. What I'm working on. It's one of the maqams, and it's a mother, they call it the mother maqams. And I'll play this for you. So that one, I started researching the name Mirabal and find out that it was a Moorish name when the Moors invaded Spain. And so this is a instrument that scale is from North Africa. But it's made like a native flute. It's got the double chambers. Normally that scale would be played as an end blow, like this. But I designed that particular scale to fit into a native, this style of playing. Then started getting involved with some different, back to the root of clay instruments. And I started experimenting on these different scales. That scale will be from Central America. However, I started looking at playing it more and more, and I realized that I could play this. Then started experimenting on all kinds of stuff. Turtle shell. It's kind of the latest thing. Still has a price tag. potato dove. It's hard to, when somebody asks you to talk about the flute, you know, there's a whole evolution that has taken place. So from that time on, when I first started out to now, people that were designing roads in Hoboken, New Jersey said, well, I think I'm going to start making flutes. People started just being drawn to this instrument. And I had heard at one point that when there's times of turmoil and destruction, that an instrument of love will start to give us direction. And who knows? Maybe this is the direction we need. Maybe more of our leaders and our elders that are out there, you know, that are really believing in the wars and the worlds need to hear this instrument. Maybe they need to hear more of this sound. I don't know. But this sound has been carried in times of war and turmoil, and somewhere it had died and it created a resurgence, and now it is where it's at. Everybody knows, you know, that certain scale without the flat tube, that's that scale with the flat tube missing. It's a native scale, and it derived from here. And I'm so proud to be part of that renaissance of being chosen to lift it up to a whole nother level. And I'm also proud to be from Taos, because where else would it have kind of be rekindled? We are an interesting, dynamic culture here, from art to music to whatever it may be. And so from that point, here's the newest stuff. Not a potato gun. These are the drone flutes. And these instruments I made and created and designed just to record with. Nobody can play them because nobody lives at 7,000 elevation. Nobody runs at 7,000 elevation like me. So I started training my body so that I could design these instruments and play a different style and play a different way. Because I didn't want to play, because there's rhythm that started to change, music and melody. Rhythm in the songs begin to change, where there was that just basic shuffle beat and long native rhythmic movements. There started to create this sort of stuff. And also half notes, different scales, mixolydian, Aeolian scales, even the blues scales without the flat two makes it pretty unique, kind of a Thelonious Monk / Mirabal-esque thing, you know. all basically relatively, minors, because somehow it works. Now we're doing, a lot of people are doing the two flutes now, and what I design is more, I like that picture where Miles Davis is like this. So I loved it. So I started saying, well, why don't we make something that's more cooler instead of something that you go like this. So this is, it's just because the homage to Miles Davis there. Once again, thank you very much for coming out, you guys, and if you have any questions after this, let me know. trying to say there is a place made just for me. There will be no one else to occupy that space. It was made for me. The voices sang songs of traveling men that came before, that left their traces on stones and coins. Naked reminders from men that only stopped for the few days, then set off leaving smoke rings for the next visitor. Offerings placed on cedar planks, rusting coins, bowls of rice, bright persimmons, and winter fruit, placed by humble hands. I drifted in like a wind. I drifted in like a song. A little weary of being cast out by an unknown ghost, still the voices called. Inside the temple built ages ago by beautiful, the unraveling of fresh silk material, stitches of yards of new kimonos. I come for forgiveness. I surrender to such sweetness. I only hope, I only hope, I don't disappoint the songs. I only hope I don't disappoint the voices. The voices. I only hope I don't disappoint the beautiful voices that call me by my original names. Date Masamune, Date Masamune, no Utsubrayameri, Tupyo. I hope I don't disappoint when they call me by my original name. See, in the rock show, it would be, I would walk out and then come back out. But now I gotta just stand here and take questions.
If you have a question, please come up to the mic and then we
Question in the back.
Hi, could you speak of your recent work with Rahim Al-Hash? Because I
Oh.
heard the interview and it sounds like a really exciting CD that's coming out.
Oh yeah, with Rahim Al-Hash. Yeah, he's the one who, Rahim is, he has an interesting story. He's an instructor at UNM. He plays a oud, and it's his story is pretty fierce. He escaped. He was one of the was one of the top 4 oud players, a master oud player that defected from his country and totally survived, throughout, out of the Gaza, everywhere, just pulled himself out of that whole world and came to America. And for a whole year, he was placed in Albuquerque. He couldn't travel anywhere, he couldn't go anywhere in the world. He had to stay because he said he wanted to claim, what do they call it, asylum in this country. And finally, just about the time that we recorded some music, is when he was offered that. But still, it's gonna be interesting when he goes back to his country. And I also work with, I'm also, there's another one, Khalif, Marcel Khalif, who also was ousted in his own country. And so that's one of the reasons why I started creating these scales, the maqams, is because of there's certain maqams that they have. There's the mother maqams, there's the father maqams, and then from the father and the mother comes another maqam, and they have birth another maqam. So there's like hundreds and hundreds of scales, and that's what they play. So I can, and so that's why I started to create these instruments, because that's one of the mother maqams. So I could go into Spain, and somebody that knows this I can collaborate with, or somebody like Rahim. Mm. Yes.
I understand you took a trip from New Orleans up into the Delta country. What did you
was a few years ago. It was after one of a pretty long tour, and I had a Taos life span of 2 weeks. I could only be here for 2 weeks, and I was like, oh, I gotta go, and then I would just take off. And I'm getting better at it, but it was one of those things where we came home from a 3-month tour, and I decided to go to study down in the deep south. Went into New Orleans, spent some time out there trying to understand what they were saying in English. I felt like Forrest Gump because we came to an ocean, outside of Baton Rouge. We came to an ocean, and we were like, where do we go now? And we're like, I don't know, Gump. Turn around. And we spent time in New Orleans in different areas in the Delta. And then from there we followed 61 all the way up. We followed, we were just following some of the old bluesmen that had, we had a map of where they were living. Everybody from where Muddy Waters was born, the whole Robert Johnson thing, the Howlin' Wolf. And I was interested in how to apply what they did into what native music, how it can generate, more of an interest. But it was based on scales. People got involved in scales, and they applied the scales into, the world. Elvis Presley started playing those scales. Led Zeppelin started playing those scales, and it turned into rock and roll. And so it was really interesting. I realized that there was places where it's still 1950s, 1960s. There was time. I went with my bass player, this Jewish guy, and so we would drive up to a gas station, and we look at it and say, "It's your turn." So I had my overalls on, and I was really pretty dark by that time. And I'm like, okay, I'll put the gas in. And then when we came to, when there was a more light complexion, he said, your turn. We were in search of the perfect tamale, or the perfect barbecue. And when we did find it, this waitress who was homegrown there, we sat down, we came into the restaurant, and she goes, you sure you want to eat here? And we were in Clarksdale, Mississippi. So yeah, and I heard this is the best barbecue, and so we sat down. We waited all that time for that place, and then we look around, there's the state police looking at us, and there's these, some hard-looking, redneck-looking folks. And we're like, whoa, maybe we shouldn't be here. So we literally walked out, and the lady goes, I can get you orders from the back. Wow, this is interesting. So we ended up in the streets just talking to a bunch of people. And maybe one day you'll see all that adventure on YouTube or something. I met an old guy, that we got some tamales on the street corner, and we started talking to this guy, and I asked him, I said, did you ever meet Martin Luther King? He looked at me. Yeah, met Martin Luther King right down there. He pointed down to this old little schoolhouse. He said, I had 13 kids. We were going to go up to Memphis when we found out Luther King got shot. And it was like, wow. I mean, literally, it's on the other side of the tracks, the difference. And we should have known, when we got out of that barbecue joint, there was a black pig with a white stripe with red lips. Okay, well, now we know the code. Don't go into places where they emphasize the lips, It was strange. It was really strange. We got into Memphis, and we hung out America is an amazing place, but I really feel that Taos is also not part of America. And I always felt the Deep South is kind of still not quite America. But, yeah. Most people go from Memphis down. We went from Nolens up.
You know how to make this succinct, no surprise, but if I understand you, you're saying, or maybe you can talk more about this thing, a musical scale built on human anatomy, coming from a different place than this more traditional, classic Western scale, the A440, right? So there are these two different scales, and you're saying that because of trade, that flute became the means by which this new form of scale came to the Pueblo?
Yeah.
And is it then like a wave of pollination that just now you're turning it into something else, and you're playing with an oud player from Iraq who will no doubt translate it in another form? I mean, just kind of riff on that a little.
Yeah. It's always been, I think, to some extent, an evolutionary instrument. It's meant to inspire, but also to really go beyond. Because nobody can claim this instrument. They say it's a plains instrument, and yes, it is. But to this point, you can go to Japan, and some guy will pick up, oh, you know, Ohayo gozaimasu, I flute player too. You know? It's really amazing how this instrument can be adapted to so many different places. But it has a unique scale, and that unique scale is based on no flat two. It has no flat two. No flat two meaning it jumps up a whole note right after the root. You have your root one, and then no flat two. And that's what made it such a unique instrumentation. But without when you have the flat two, it's more of a diatonic. I want to take it so that it's a direction that I felt like I was going when I was much younger. But now we are so inundated with a computer A440, this has got to be perfect pitch. So I don't want these instruments to be tempered, because once you temper them, then you can, you know, then humidity won't bother them. Nothing can bother them. But this instrument is based on such an elaborate history that I think it needs to be placed into a whole nother level of key signatures and scales, and that's what happened to the blues. The blues scale is a certain scale that only can be riffed on in a certain way, in a certain style. And it was also just played on, you know, like only like 3 notes, and 2 of those notes were the same. But see, and this instrument, I think, if you were to hear it probably 100 years ago, it wouldn't create the same effect. It might, but it wouldn't, because now we are so toned, we are so waiting for that certain sound. There's an expectation of sound. But the time that this instrument created its evolutionary scale, nobody had heard it before. So there was no basis for it. Then Western instrumentation started coming in and said A440 is the proper sound and the proper key. But just as oud players, or just as shamisen players, or, you know, these instruments, we play in between the black and the white key. And I think that's what the beauty of these instruments are. I think that's kind of answers some of your questions. Yeah. You don't have to use a mic, you know, if you have any questions. Yes.
Back to the. Can everybody hear me if I talk over?
No, I can reiterate.
You can. Okay.
I know learned that word last week. Reiterate. No, I'm just joking. Go ahead.
Bravo. Okay, the personal flute that you identify being the length of the bone. I've got a teeny bit of wisdom teaching about the ceremonial pipe, and the wisdom that goes with it is meant to also say that a personal pipe is also the same length as this bone for ceremony. So is there a vibration that comes from the pipe also? What is the connection? There's got to be something there then that says that there's an importance about this bone.
Well, you know, it probably just has to, I mean, the Hawaiians believe that if you want to be a good nose flute player, you get the femur of a dead flute player. If you want to be a good fisherman, you cut the femur off and make fishing hooks out of his bones. So maybe it has something to do with,
The Tibetans believe that too.
yeah. So there's probably some connection to that. However, you know, it goes into spirituality, and I hate to get involved in spirituality because there's so many different. Yeah, exactly. There's so many different pathways to one element of just that, and so I'm more interested in I mean, I know where my spirituality is, so I'm much more interested from academia, from a place of light and a place of sound, and a place of you know, fluid dynamics. And so, if there is, you know, I would like to get like a bone from a really tall guy, then I can play a deeper flute. So I don't know if it has to do with shoe sizes, that kind of thing. You know? No, I'm just joking. Or thumb sizes, I don't know.
I think they have some ancient burials that they found. Some really good giants you might be interested in.
Yeah, there's a lot of small Pueblo people, so we... Another question, two more questions, please, in the back.
All the Kokopelli rock art panels around the Southwest you've probably seen, you've been able to come up with any kind of information from his flute, or is that rock art recording of that Kokopelli flute so basic that there's nothing to learn from it?
The Kokopelli mana, they call him in Hopi. That's a kachina, and he's a fertility. They call him not necessarily, lack of a better term. He's a fertility god. There's several stories, but the main thing is that it's based on pollination. It's based on the dragonflies, the gift of lift. It's based on melody. Melody has the gift of lift. And then it's based on fertility. I mean, sometimes, we Santa-fize Kokopelli. I mean, the Kokopelli art is like, in all the rock art, he's like, it's all based on fertility. And so this instrument, being the instrument of love, to some extent, is based on procreation. And then there's a whole other part of it that could be based on, like, we could easily be getting it all wrong. He could be leading us to a whole other direction of warning us about life, overindulgence, and he could be saying, hey, look at what I got to carry on my back, based on my... There's several ways to take it, because the Kokopelli mana is like he'll tell you one thing but means another thing. He'll speak backwards and tell you that this is the true way. but he'll tell you the true way and say it's the other way. And so it's an interesting take, but I think we've kind of watered down his the true meaning of who and what he is. I mean, he's very powerful, very, very amazingly powerful to a lot of the Puebloans, the Zunis, the Hopis. So that's a whole other concept right there, because that particular petroglyph also extends down into like in Otavalo. You'll find it in Otavalo. You'll find it in Central America, and you'll find it all the way up into Canada. So it's all over. Then you go into Australia, and you'll find the same rock art. You'll find the same particular creature in Australia as you'll find in Northern Ireland. You'll find that. So there's something that has to do with the same as the bone. To this ancient being that has maybe sometimes I feel like maybe he's mocking us. Yeah, or he's saying, hey, you guys, keep it real, or something. One more question, please. Yes, sir.
Robert, do you know Abby Conant, the trombonist here in town? She and her husband have a studio down on Los Patos behind the car dealer.
Oh, I don't know.
Does she ring a bell? They're classical musicians. They work in Germany.
Okay.
They have their own sabbatical. She has a new album for it. About 18, 20 feet long.
Yeah.
Gotta go introduce yourself. It's noise, man. I mean, it's
Yeah,
enormous.
yeah.
They're putting on soirees over the winter.
Yeah, I get interested in all
Yeah,
this
she's
stuff.
a terrific combo.
Yeah, that's funny. That's cool. Yeah, it's weird. You know, you get the tiniest little women coming to the shop saying they're not the biggest flute. It's all love. It's all sexual. You know, it's crazy, but that's, you know, it goes back to that young man that sat by the river and was told by some Cheyenne goddess or god, you know, the Cheyenne god, beautiful beast, you know. Here, bro, play by the river. It'll work. Shit, it don't work. Somebody else picks it up. And they stand in line. Thank you guys. Good night.